I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I'm Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli, safely on vacation. Andrew Kuo, safely in quarantine, self-imposed, but no days off.
No days off. Holding it together, Ben. Do I feel weird? I don't feel weird. I haven't been locked in. I'm not locked in here with me. I'm locked in here with me.
Are you okay?
Does that work? I'm okay.
You sound like really hyped up.
Trying to keep myself in good spirits, man.
Are you overly caffeinated right now?
Trying to be.
What's your coffee routine looking like while in captivity?
I'm a tea guy. I can't drink coffee, but maybe I can drink coffee. I used to think it was too much caffeine, but now I kind of dabble in like the English breakfast world. So I make a big pot of it in the morning, and I drink it through the day, and I try to stop at like 4.
So you came in this hot with no coffee.
Well, I think does English breakfast tea have as much caffeine as coffee?
I don't know.
It's close, right?
I don't really drink tea. I like it. I don't really drink it.
Why? Is it because of the taste? Is it because
it's
habit?
fine. I have no problem with tea. It's okay. It's just not a natural go-to where I'm like, oh, what do I want right now? Some tea. I think it's good if you're feeling a little under the weather. You want to drink something warm. I like it in the summer as iced tea. It's just not my go-to. But yeah, I've been brewing my own coffee now because the coffee shops near me are generally closed. And I'm starting to like the routine of it a little bit. It's like you bring out the digital scale, you do 30 some grams of coffee, add in 350 to 400 grams of boiling water, and one of our friends on Instagram was giving me some advice on the proper way of brewing coffee, and I've kind of started enjoying the I guess the sort of steps of it versus just getting a cup of coffee from a barista and being on my way. I'm starting to like the process and trusting it.
Oh, weird. Back with the process. I like this. One of my buddies got really deep into the coffee world, like went to South America to like hang out with people who created amazing beans and all that stuff. And he became kind of like a scientist in his own kitchen with all these gadgets and like these scales you're talking about and all these pour over techniques and timers. And he told me it was deeply unrewarding because he was constantly chasing like this thing that he doesn't even know. Like he's like, I'm trying to get to this perfect cup, but like I've never had it. It's always a little disappointing, but it's addictive. So every time someone goes over to his house, he's like, can I make you a cup of coffee? Because he can only consume like 2 cups a day.
I get that. I'm not one of those people who specifically has that like, oh, I'm really into wine or I'm really into, I don't know, craft beers. And I think you see that with like mezcal. Like there's a few sort of routes for sort of the modern.
You got hoops, man.
Exactly. The hobbyist no longer has a model train set. Now it's like mezcal.
I love that stuff, man. Like I love hanging out with wine nerds. I don't love wine at all, but I love being around them, and I'll definitely like enjoy having a glass with them. But I just have no way to talk about it or no framework for it. I also think it's a scam. But
Wait. What's the scam part?
Like when experts tell you something tastes good or bad. There's like what documentary was on Netflix that went viral about the Chinese guy who put old labels on new bottles and experts couldn't tell the difference?
I certainly believe that something like wine, which is so much based on just an individual being able to tell between two different things and their opinions on that, and that naturally being impacted by perception. If someone's like, this is a $10,000 wine, and you're like, okay, so I should probably like this.
Yeah,
and they
it's
give you like a $20 bottle of wine. The odds are you'll be like, pretty damn good.
Yeah, this is basketball related, right? This is contract. Well, maybe it's not basketball related. That's why we love hoops, because we can get to the bottom of it, where wine is so subjective.
Well, wine is kind of art, right?
100%. Yeah.
Like someone's like, yeah, this is a painting that sells for $1 million. You're like, oh, it's important. And even though it doesn't look that different from something that anyone could have done, like theoretically, or a piece of art from a totally obscure person, this one is important, and therefore it is a great piece of art.
I mean, this is a never-ending debate. Someone will say, how come Mr. Brainwash sells out all of his paintings and they're very expensive, but this painting here that shows in a gallery gets all these great reviews but doesn't have the same market activity as Mr. Brainwash? And I always say it's just the difference between the market and art. When you criticize art, you try not to keep market, you try not to have the market influence it too much. So the cost value isn't necessarily like the critical value. It's confusing. It's super confusing, but it's fun.
There's definitely a parallel though there with wine, in that idea of there are people with an amount of expertise who say this is great. Mm-hmm. And there are people who then follow those experts, and it's like a whole daisy chain going back to one person saying, yes, it has, look at these legs on it, and it has this notes of honeysuckle. And people be like, honeysuckle notes, man, you heard them.
Yeah. I mean, when I say it's a scam, I find it to be a really enjoyable one. Like, no one's wrong. I'm not like, aha, you don't know. I'm like, fair enough. You just convinced me a cheap glass of wine is wonderful and an expensive glass of wine is just okay. I'm like, I love it. This is great.
Because all we're talking about here is taste for the most part. Because there are certain wines that I have that I'm like, this is mediocre. This is boring. Don't like it. It's thin. It's too acidic. And that's just what I like. Like the price point may not have that much to do with it, but at the same time, there is a difference.
Yeah.
Like super cheap wine is probably not as good as the stuff that people say is really good. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, in some sort of like vacuum.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the way that they're made and people singling out, oh, this stuff is really good, it's better than the other stuff. I don't know.
I mean, I love gatekeepers in every world. I think I definitely want to hear someone explain to me what's good and bad. I love it. And for a while, I was really into single malt whiskeys, and I thought those were really cool because there's such a limited number of them, and they kind of disappear because you age them for 12, 15, 30. If you're lucky enough, you get to taste one that's older. And they're not necessarily better or worse than a blend that isn't a single malt. But you can probably, in like a few years, you could taste almost like a lot of available whiskeys to normal consumers.
Well, that's kind of why I dig Mezcal, even though I am not an expert and I couldn't even say, oh, go pick up this bottle. Like, this is a brand that I love. Just because they taste so different.
Yeah.
Where it's not based on like a gradient necessarily of, oh, this one is far better, at least in my opinion. I'm looking for the same price point. I'm trying to find stuff that I just personally enjoy more. And I think that's more rewarding than trying to like sift through all the bottles on a shelf of wine and pick out like, okay, this is a Barolo, I'll probably like it.
True.
I think it's cool finding a weird mezcal that's like super smoky and just a gnarly one, and then another one that's very, very different. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. My latest thing when we used to go to restaurants would be, they're like, what do you like to taste? And I used to, when they asked for my wine preference, and I used to say, past tense is so weird. I used to say like something light that would go nice with what I ordered to eat. But recently I had been saying something just not boring. Just give me something with a little bit of like a conversation point. I don't want something light. I don't want something dry. Just give me something cool. And if it's like they're like, "You want something bitter or funky?" I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds like better than something that just goes down my gullet," you know.
So, you know, we're talking about restaurants in the past tense here. Yeah. And I saw you put up a tweet about how you missed eating in Chinese restaurants.
Yeah, man.
Is that what you're missing most in this week to, what are we now in? Like 10 days, whatever, of things more or less being shut down?
Depending on when you started taking this seriously. And I think some people are on day one maybe. But I miss, you know, I can order bulletproof glass Chinese food. And I can even get polysolid Chinese food that is still open, but I miss sitting in that restaurant. Like there's a heat component to great Chinese food, in my opinion, of like that wok, that breath of the dragon, that thing they talk about, and it kind of fills the entire restaurant. And I miss like sitting down and kind of being in that environment. And we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but I got kind of wistful last night, being like, I can't make this Chinese food at my house because I have an electric stove and I just don't know how to cook it with that skill and those materials. And I saw somebody on Twitter a few days ago making like beef and broccoli. They're like, the quintessential New York City dish. Everyone should know about it, whatever, you know, Twitter speak. And a few minutes later, they're like, you're better off ordering it from a Chinese restaurant. I'm like, yeah, because that dish is so difficult to make. Like
but beef and broccoli Tim's. If you've worn a pair of Timberlands, you can make beef and broccoli at home totally adequately.
Snapback, check. Yankees snapback, double check. Tim's 8-ball jacket, beef and broccoli, done. But it's so hard to make that dish. I cannot make it because you have to, I mean, this is a gross word, but you have to velvet the meat, which is like a process of like putting
King.
Putting it in like baking soda and water to make it kind of the right texture. And then the broccoli is really hard to make. I'll just put that on the table. Like you can boil broccoli, you can steam it, you can microwave it, but to make it really delicious takes a little bit of skill. It's like frying an egg hard. You can eat it, but to make it really good, you need to know what you're doing.
I gotta say, I'm not a big broccoli fan unless it's in a Chinese restaurant.
Yes, you lost me, but then you got me back.
That's right, karma.
That's right. I love broccoli so much, but I prefer it soaked up with like delicious soy sauce and rice wine.
So you're missing Chinese restaurants.
I'm missing Chinatown. Like, I have like, I don't feel wistful about this, but I have no home to go back to. Like, New York City is where like my last place is. Like, you know, my parents don't have a house that I can go to anymore. So I think of Mott Street as like my longest memory in my life.
Your ancestral homeland.
I mean, that's all I got. Like, Wo Hop is like kind of my oldest physical, oldest memory of a place I can go to.
Wo Hop is your womb.
It is my Allen Iverson draft. It's the
Where
beginning of everything. Yes. But I miss going there, man. I miss the option of going there. What do you miss? Do you miss like walking around? Like,
no, I'm still walking around.
Oh, you're rebel.
I'm not crazy.
I mean, we debated this yesterday, so we don't have to really litigate this. But
no, I know. I was intentionally immediately relitigating. But no, I think what's easiest to miss is just being around people. And I know that's really vague, but that's kind of what it is to me. And we alluded to this, actually elaborated on this yesterday when I'm like, just the feeling of being outside around people and no one acknowledges each other and everybody is staying out of each other's way, and just how dehumanizing that is. And that's just being outside. You know, we're not in a bar around people. We're not touching anyone. And when you see photos of people like hugging or like watching a movie where people are really in close quarters, it now feels odd. Yeah. And you're like, oh, don't do that.
I know.
And you're like, it's super dangerous. And I do wonder a little bit, has our relationship with physical space changed? And obviously it has changed in the short sense. Will there be ramifications of this? Will we be cold and weird? Because now love Philadelphia, love the Sixers,
Yes,
love the
Philly's
Bullies,
the
love
best.
everything about Philly. That city was particularly ravaged by the Spanish flu. It was destroyed by it. And you gotta wonder, does it take a long time for the sort of civic psyche of a city to recover from something like that? And when people talk about Philly being passionate, but also like mean and crude and like cold, again, these are also perceptions. These may not be the truth, but that was a city specifically that was destroyed by the Spanish flu. It's worth considering. Will New York, as the current epicenter for the coronavirus outbreak in the world, like we're fucking number one, baby, right now, will our relationship with other people be the same going forward?
I mean, that's a good point. I always think of America, the 13 colonies being founded by Puritans, and their vision of this country kind of still being with us in 2020. And yeah, I think this flu has changed everything forever, but I'm kind of hedging on the extent of it because of technology, because of the internet, because of peer pressure, information. The way we talk to each other is different now than when Philly got the Spanish flu.
And there are stories that are absolutely heartbreaking from that 1918 flu in Philadelphia, where people were so scared to catch the flu. And people, I think, I certainly was not familiar with the severity of the Spanish flu until going back and reading about it. And people would get it and die within hours in horrible, repulsive ways, like bleeding from all the holes in their face. It was just insane.
Yeah.
And it went on for a year.
Yeah.
So
without
I'm
getting
talking
into
about
that-
like,
yeah.
if we do this for another couple weeks and we go back to normalcy, I don't think we'll see an enduring effect. If this lasts and over the next year and a half, there are these isolating periods where it's like, all right, everybody back inside, can't go out. And we spend a year dealing with this. I think it could be a little more permanent. But your point is also accurate, that we are still in communication with people and we're still FaceTiming and we're still talking on the phone and we're on Twitter or Instagram or at D-Nices with, Mark Zuckerberg, like just, beatboxing in the corner.
The coolest kids, man.
Ellen
Well-
is here and we're doing graffiti tags.
Will Smith is in the building.
But I do wonder if the sort of physical dimension, if this keeps going on, will change for a lot of us for a long time.
I think so. I think the one thing, this is like, it's like a video game level experience of things to be scared of. My first fear after hopefully this normalizes is if we go outside and this place physically doesn't look like the thing we recognize, which is like your favorite places will be closed. People will, like you said, navigate your space and their space differently. It's gonna look different, especially the New York City subways. What's gonna happen there? But I think you're right. Like, it depends on a lot of things. The uncertainty is the word. Uncertainty is the word I always come back to, because the government doesn't tell us what the plan is. Cuomo just got on TV saying, "We don't know anything. Please, someone do something." There's so much up in the air right now that it's hard for me to even grasp. Like, we don't even know what this virus is and how it behaves. I think they just found live cultures of the virus on that cruise ship that's 17 days old. So we don't really know how this thing that's destroying our lives is even behaving. And not to get too stony, we're not even sure how our reaction to this thing will be. Like, we don't know
Yes.
how we're going to.
Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm just sort of posing that question, like, how will isolation affect us? Because we do know that being too online makes you go freaking crazy.
Yeah.
That being on Twitter all day and absorbing that kind of information, that sort of hysteria, that kind of negativity, probably has a not so great effect on how your brain operates. And I'm not saying that everyone is going to be poisoned by being online, but we are at a point that we have never seen before. We have never seen this amount of the population of the world being subjected to this much information all at once, so much of it negative, so much of it hysterical, so much of it angry. Like, we are seeing a mass poisoning of the planet right now because of this virus in a way that we have never seen before in the history of humanity.
I agree. And I before this all happened, I always used to think, like, in New York City, it gets kind of tough with subways, and if you don't have a job you love, or if something bad happens and you have bad luck, like, it's important not to be in the position where if someone calls you a name or you drop something, you just don't burst out into tears. Like, I think sometimes as New Yorkers, we walk such a fine line being like, I'm okay, I'm really not okay. And, like, to be able to self-care and have that Gen X tranquility is something we always talk about. Like, your experience online, we have to develop skills to shape it and to your own preference. And I always say to you, like, I really love our small circle. Like, shout out to Kat Marnell and all these people I like to read, Nomi Fry. Like, I really enjoy the people we interact with. And the people I don't love to interact with, that I can't even see, kind of sometimes interject to try to make your life miserable. And it's a skill to not pay them as much attention, and it's a skill to block them and mute them, but it gets under your skin and it's a part of your life.
Without being too boomery, I do think it is important to try to get off for a little while, because otherwise we're talking about waking up, being subjected to this kind of chaotic, anxiety-causing mayhem from the minute you are opening your eyes to the minute you're going to bed. And I think we have to make our own decisions on how much is palatable for us and our sanity. Maybe it's none. Maybe you're just like, I just can't be on that. I have to delete it and be offline. And I'm going to read books. And this is how I'm going to deal.
No.
I'm not saying
Ben,
us.
don't. No.
I'm saying for other people.
Okay.
Dude, come on, books. I'm talking about other people.
I'm too busy burning them.
But other people might say, like, you know what? I'm in a lake house. I'm just going to hike every single day. I'm going to do that. Or I'm in New York City in my apartment. I'm going to get offline. I'm going to read, and just cook. I just think we have to come up with ways to spend our time, because there is a risk of just being angry and upset all the time. And we know that that has a physical effect on people. We know this. Mm-hmm. Waking up and being angry for 18 hours a day is not good for you. Like, that's not a great health option.
Right. Yeah. Everything you do at that volume affects you. If you watch the same movie every day for 2 years, it's going to change your life in a certain way. But you know, like with the internet, I feel like every platform or every place you go to has a different vibe to it. I stopped with Facebook maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago. I just didn't like the tone of it. There was a lot of stuff I didn't really want to spend my mind space in, like bragging and or wishing happy birthday or conspiracy theories. You know, like it really turned up really fast. But I love Twitter, but I heavily kind of curate like who I listen to, because that is a really bad place.
One thing I do not like about Twitter, among other things, is that if you block someone, their tweets still show up if someone quote tweets them, but it's like blurred out. So you're like, all right, what did they say? It's an annoying way of like keeping you clicking on shit that you don't want to see.
It's a wry smile, right? They know what they're doing.
Yeah, and that's really lame to me, because like I don't block many people who are like, oh, your takes on the Sixers suck. Maybe a few people who are just incessant and really annoying, but that's not what I typically do. But I do block like Republican politicians, because I don't want to see them even being tweeted into my timeline if they're being dunked on. I just want the option of like removing them, to your point earlier, from like my experience. I don't want to see Trump's tweets in my feed without my permission.
Yeah, and that's exactly, and that's tolerance. And I like to read Republicans, but I don't like to read people who talk about Republicans, like, or I don't like to. You can spot a troll from a mile away, so I kind of just sift those out. But Twitter's a weird place, and I really love Instagram, but I don't find myself on there quite often. I think it's limited in its kind of joke capability. Like Twitter, the joke potential is really high, and Instagram is very high too, but it's just not as funny. People use it to get on a soapbox that I don't love personally.
I do think in the way that older generations had their brains turned to mush by Facebook, and we saw them, and it's generally older people who are heavily into QAnon. They're bored, and their fears for their whole life was that the internet was going to poison the brains of the youth, and it was them. The old people are the ones who poisoned themselves. They were the ones who were unable to adapt because younger people grew up with it. Older people were not capable of going from a non-digital world to one that was dominated by the internet without losing their shit. And we see it. They're either incapable of functioning on it, they're getting scammed and bilked out of their savings, right, or they've completely lost their brains. Like they did not have like the chemistry after a life of being offline to suddenly shift into this new dimension. They couldn't do it.
Did you see that news story last night of Dan Patrick, the governor of Texas, saying like old people should let their lives go for the younger generation in this time? Like we should just resume.
What a nice sacrifice he's making.
I know. It's like I believe he used the word grandparents, and I'm like, dude, aren't you? What is happening? No, what? And people on Twitter came after him with like his vote for pro-life, his consistent vote for pro-life, but not caring about people who are alive. And I thought it was kind of an interesting thing to think about, like an interesting, like weird sci-fi nihilistic kind of novella idea. But what an odd thing to say.
Well, what's really remarkable about this, and we'll get into the proceedings in Congress shortly, but the odd thing was him volunteering older people to die in exchange for juicing the economy, which was not necessarily a offer that the elderly of America have accepted or offered.
Or heard about.
Right. They're like, wait. We're doing what? We're sacrificing ourselves for the youth? We have never done that ever. That goes in direct opposition to what we've been telling you every election for our entire lives. All we care about is not helping the younger people.
I'm Vince Carter,
but now,
and I'm playing another
the ultimate sacrifice? Dude, we just voted for Joe Biden.
Yeah, I know. So weird. It's bonkers. I mean, Trump, like what is happening? It was really surreal and really kind of.
Grandma's willing to lay down her life to get the stock market up. Like it's just insane.
But it was an interesting, like stony thought exercise, right? Being like, is this kind of the darkest solution? But is it still a solution? Obviously, I'm not down. I like everyone to stay alive as long as possible. And the stock market and economy are man-made things, and we can make them work, but we cannot bring someone back from the dead.
Well, what I found most interesting is that this is a casual thought to the typical Republican, that there will be collateral damage of people who are poor, people who are sick, people who are old. And that's fine, because this is, in their mind, a version of social Darwinism. You can't let these weak members of society hold back the rest of us from having the Dow Jones climb.
Eugenicists love this. They're just like
exactly.
licking their
That's what I'm
chops.
right. And I mean, someone pointed out on Twitter that this is the exact same justification of slavery or any kind of cruelty. Like,
That's not wrong.
But the economy, you can't mess up the economy.
We cannot pay our kids to play basketball because that's just not the way it is.
No. You guys have to all get fired and the money will go to the corporations because the economy. It's like a totally non-specific idea of like money, jobs. It doesn't actually tie to the people who hold these jobs. It's just the economy. This vague amorphous idea that like money never sleeps, Wall Street too.
Right. It got me thinking of the way like some teams build their rosters, just being like, well, we need a point guard who looks like this and a shooting guard who looks like Reggie Miller and then a big guy. And I'm like, no. All we have to do is change and success will follow. As long as we stop looking at the economy as this immovable object, like, okay, a demographic of America is going to have to sacrifice maybe their lives for this economy to come back. I'm like, what if we just change the way we do the economy and not sacrifice any lives? They're like, no, that's not possible.
I don't even, yes, I'm with you. I don't even understand exactly what the argument is here to say, look, if this whole social distancing shutdown thing doesn't work within 2 weeks, we got to get this up and roaring again. And like, if a couple million people die, that's okay because the economy.
Yeah.
I don't get it, because the obvious logical thing here is that if people are dying all over the place and there's still jeopardy of catching this, then the economy is going to be in the shitter. So it doesn't even seem to be based on any sort of actual economic idea that like, look, old people are going to have to die. Like, tons of people are going to die. There will be hospitals flooded with patients. If you get a heart attack, you're going to die because there won't be a bed for you. Like, the idea that the economy will chug along gracefully as mass death overwhelms America and its medical system just doesn't come close to holding water. So I'm really wondering, what is this actually about?
I mean, he's just riffing, and you're right. It doesn't work. And
but I guess what I'm saying is, and this is what I'm asking you, what is this about? What is it really about? Because it's not about helping people. It's not about jobs. The stock market, like, who gives a fuck about the stock market? It'll come back once things are normal again. We all know this.
I give a
What's
fuck
this
about the
about?
stock market. I care about the stock market because that is directly related to the way our friends make a living. And
Is it?
it is.
How?
If the infrastructure is compromised, then businesses...
How is the infrastructure compromised? By the stock market being bad.
If all of our savings go away and all of our investments in 401ks and no one has enough money to like put up as collateral to borrow from other places, then we're going to see like less opportunity for the people right next to us to earn a living. Like the risk is too high.
I can see that argument saying that people's retirements will shrink and their credit
my
will
God,
be
this
worse.
is huge.
I'm saying that I get that argument, but I'm saying on a functional level, to me, the idea that we have to get this economy up and going doesn't make any sense at all if you don't have this virus under some sort of control. I just don't see the urgency. It's
That,
like,
that
get
I
the
agree.
virus done, and then the economy will come back. It's like, if our
This
country...
is Trump's take.
But
Trump is like, it'll come back. Don't think about the economy, but we have to think about it.
But that's
now.
not his take. His take is like, we have to get the economy back. His take is absolutely not.
He
Let's-
just changed that like 2 days ago. He keeps on changing his
What are you
mind.
talking about?
No,
Last night, he was like,
I know. Last night was 2 days ago. Like before that, he has been like, "Don't worry about the stock market. It'll come back better than ever." And we're like, "Yes and no." And then he just changed his tune.
oh, okay. Well, I'm saying his most recent stance, as far as I understand it, and that could
Yes.
be changing right now, was that He was like, look, if we can't get rid of this whole corona thing in 2 weeks, we got to open America back up because the cure can't be worse than the cause, or whatever his nonsensical phrase was. I'm just saying, okay, maybe it takes another couple weeks of the economy being shitty. We'll come back from that. That's okay. We just have to get this thing taken care of before the economy will work anyhow.
I mean,
You can't have the virus rolling along and the economy simultaneously doing well. That's just not going to work.
well, fuck. This is tricky, right? This is our debate from yesterday. It's going to take a long time because people aren't doing anything. And the curve is a debatable thing that a lot of people have been trying to figure out, not with bad intentions, with the best intentions. Like, what is the curve? What is the spike? When do they occur? Is it controllable? A lot of smart people are trying to figure this out. And, you know, when we are like, you're going to stop me from seeing my friends? I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, for 15 days, you're just on FaceTime. Like,
But look, without revisiting that totally, the real thing here is that people need to change their behavior. And just the quick defense of what I'm saying is that if I want to walk around outside and stay 6 feet away from my friend and talk, that is absolutely changing behavior. The problem is that a lot of people aren't. And when I was walking down, a busy street near me over the weekend, there was a table with guys selling like hats or shirts or fruit or whatever. And there was like 6 dudes hanging out, listening to music, smoking weed, all within like a foot of each other. Like, they're the ones you have to pass stricter rules because people who aren't changing their behavior. The people who are hiding inside all day and feverishly washing their hands and like going out once every 3 days to the supermarket and like walking around outside and staying far apart. That's not the issue. That's not what's keeping this thing rolling. It's the people who are like the construction workers who are, I saw a group of them yesterday. They were not wearing masks. They were like a foot apart, like loading stuff into a truck. It's the people who are on the front lines, who are working in supermarkets, whether it's loading things or the cashiers. Like, they are the people who are in jeopardy here.
and we're not even sure what is going to work and what this virus is yet. And we don't, we should look at the information coming from China with a little bit of skepticism. But they claim this works, and that's all we have to go by. Italy has seen a drop, but I think the debate between the economy and actual like lives, which sounds ridiculous to me, was coming, and I think it came right on time. And this debate was going to happen, and we're going to have really annoying, dark debates evolving moving forward. And you can kind of almost predict this.
I agree. And the one thing that's a real problem is because the Republican Party is such a death cult and they care so little about people's lives that you're going to have like the governor in Mississippi saying, we're not shutting down. So you're like, okay, so you're telling people to go to the beach and live normally. Well, we're all under one border. So now what are we going to do? Create borders so people from Mississippi can't come to New York?
That just doesn't work. A virus doesn't give
But you get what I
give a
mean.
damn. Yeah,
it's
for
like,
sure.
It's like if we're saying, okay, we're going to shut it down as hard as we can for like a couple weeks, and we're going to really lower and diminish the amount of new cases that are being contracted and try to buckle down, and then half the country or half the states in the country are like, life is normal. Let's get it roaring again. Like, this is not going to work.
Yeah, it's like taking antibiotics, and when you start feeling better, but you're not done with it, being like, I feel better, I don't have to take the rest of these. I'm like, well, you kind of do. And it's so funny that everybody, I was watching the news this morning, and some people were like, we're looking right at Florida right now because they're not taking this seriously at all. And New York is the epicenter, and Cuomo was like, rightfully was like, we have the densest population, therefore we're the test subject, and we're the canary in the mine, I think he said. And everyone was looking at Florida being like, they are the ones that we're really scared about. Like, shout out to Florida, man. Always holding it down.
Always Florida.
Yeah. But they're not taking precautions. They're not really doing anything. That's a little scary.
It's like their cretinous governor, like Rick DeSantis.
Yeah.
They're cracking jokes about this, and it's like, it's a virtue signaling.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that being worried about this is like liberal tears is going to cause so much death and destruction.
Yeah.
And what'll probably happen is that,
months.
This will be super mitigated, hopefully, by people doing the right thing. And then maybe it won't be as bad as we expect. And then those same complete imbeciles will crow about how they were right.
Yeah, I know. I had to stop watching the McConnell Pelosi stuff. Like it's becoming politics now. I'm really frustrated. We don't have a solution or any sort of response. But yeah, I have a lot of faith in human beings and our leaders, but I have more faith in scientists. So I've shifted my like kind of anxiety towards the science community, being like, can you guys get there faster than 12 months? Can it be like 11 months and 15 days? 14 days? Like,
do they want it enough?
I mean, they've already isolated the virus, it took, I think, them 2 weeks in Canada to do it. Shout out to Canada. And that's pretty amazing. So they're like testing things, but this testing takes time. And I'm just looking at that community because it's not, I mean, a lot of it is whitewashed or framed a certain way, but I think that is where my brain is turning, being like, I don't trust these politicians, but I kind of still have trust in scientists.
I don't think that's a odd way of looking at this scenario, meaning that politicians are not going to get this right.
No, they will not.
America has far too many governors that are absolute morons. We have far too many politicians in power that don't care about the lives of Americans, even an iota. They do not care. And then we have an opposition party that is completely toothless and, loses arguments before they even start. So I would say, yes, if we're going to get out of this relatively unscathed, it's going to be because science is like, oh, we got it. Here's the vaccine. Like, oh, all right. Whew, that was crazy there for a second. That could have really gone sideways.
And then figure out the money afterwards, but we have this vaccine. Meaning like get people healthy and we can argue about our human arguments later, but keep everyone healthy. And it's so funny. Trump really backtracked the China thing. He was like, Chinese Americans are great. They love America. Let's stop yelling at them. And I'm like, oh, because you realize the people who are equipped to help you are like Asian, or it's Kellyanne Conway whose kids are part Filipino.
Yeah, but everything he said was totally othering Asians in a gruesome way also. He was like, they are helping us. Like, we appreciate them.
I don't mind that stuff. That he's a moron, but like he can't parse that nuance. So I'll take it. When he was like, we got to stop treating Asians this way, I'm like, yo, wow. Kellyanne Conway with some influence in there.
Truly a meaningful moment.
I saw George Conway once walk into a place I was hanging out, and he was like, is this where the wedding is? And we're like, oh, you're looking for next door. And I was like, that was George Conway. It was really surreal.
I don't know that I would recognize him.
He's kind of cool looking. He's like a 1920s cartoon character. But he's part Filipino. Therefore, Kellyanne Conway's kids are part Filipino. So she's been really pushing back against this China narrative.
Yeah, she's a real soldier.
She's my king.
So the last couple episodes, we figured out ways to talk about basketball in that trying to avoid the natural nostalgia, the whist. We talked about Allen Houston, prom king. And we talked about, what else did we talk about? Oh, Charlie Ward, unsung hero of the Knicks 99 championship run.
Forgotten for maybe a good reason.
What I've been thinking about a little bit since yesterday, when we also potted, was that you mentioned Al Hibbert. I'm sorry, Al Hibbert. Al Horford. No, you mentioned Roy Hibbert. And you had compared him unfairly to Zion Williamson, which
Retracted.
you immediately retracted. And I was thinking about the Roy Hibbert era, the time of verticality. That shit sucked.
It's hard to watch, man. It's hard to watch on classic NBA TV.
It wasn't that long ago. It was like 7 years ago.
Yo, Hibbert could still put on a uniform and like give it a shot. Like, what is he, like 34?
Got to be older than that, right? But he's an assistant coach for the Sixers.
Yeah,
Because Hibbert played 4 years in college too, so he was 3 years older than most players when he came into the league.
he was a lottery pick after
think
being a
it-
senior in Georgetown.
I think he played 4 years there.
Yo, Roy Hibbert's 33, man. That's wild. He could be in the middle of a max contract if we still like played this way, right?
Well, do we play that way or not? What changed? Because in that era, and we're talking about, again, this is not long ago. That's why the NBA is so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because it feels like the Roy Hibbert era was a long time ago.
Ages.
And it was not.
no.
The Roy Hibbert era was like 2014.
It's so confusing because Danny Granger is out of the league. Like, what? That Pacers team is like no longer around. But they're
Like
all.
it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Or some, whatever, 6, but
Yeah.
still. Like that in 2014, the top 4 finishers in the NBA for Defensive Player of the Year voting: Joakim Noah, Roy Hibbert, DeAndre Jordan, and Serge Ibaka.
I love Serge Ibaka.
That was not that long ago.
Nope. I know. Joakim Noah was about to join a contender this year. He still can ball, I guess.
Maybe.
But yeah, the league has entirely kind of shifted, and my take is always personnel. But like those were seen as award-winning players, and maybe it's not about personnel, and it's mostly about perception. Or
It's odd because if you look at the best players in the league 6 years ago, the names are not unfamiliar. You know, it's LeBron, it's Kevin Durant. The names
Steph
are
Curry was already good.
yeah, for the most part, other than the guys who've literally entered the league since then, the Embiids and Simmons and, you know, their ilk, like literally guys in their first 5 years of playing. The stars at that time are familiar guys. And this was like the rise of Paul George during that era.
John
And the rise of Kawhi was going on. Right. It feels like the modern era in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But the defenses were built around Roy Hibbert, Joakim Noah, Serge Ibaka. It feels strange. It feels like 12 years ago.
Yeah. Do you think it's because of speed? Like, as a community, we mock Daryl Morey and his. It's unfortunate that we won't get to see this small lineup perform in the playoffs, but we mock that decision. But it was on its way anyway, right? Like we were evolving to a place of that end, right?
Well, it's a good question because I think Steph Curry was the tip of the spear in terms of having a championship team that dissuaded opponents from putting their best defensive player, their rim protector, the Hibbert style guy on the court. And there was only one Steph Curry, but he also made you decide to build a contender a little differently. That you could get through the season with Steven Adams, but when push comes to shove, Steven Adams is going to have to sit down. Enes Kanter is going to have to sit down. Because if you want to win a chip, you have to go through Golden State. And I think that kind of created a top-down approach to devaluing those kind of centers. And I think it just sort of tumbled from there. Because there aren't that many guys in the league that when you say, all right, get out there, you're kind of immobile, but you're going to get isolated and attacked off the dribble by the opponent's best player. There aren't that many guys who can exploit that matchup every time out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny because it's a copycat league, and it doesn't take long for a team to try to do what Golden State does. So you have kind of like a multiplying effect where if, you're right, Golden State was an anomaly. Steph Curry was an anomaly on that team, and they smartly built around him and his skill set. And right, like if you're Rudy Gobert and you're awesome and a Defensive Player of the Year award winner, you got to sit versus certain lineups when you play the Warriors, and you're eventually, hopefully, going to have to go through the Warriors. And I think other teams saw that and tried to emulate it. But this is it more personnel or point of view? Is
It's a good
Trae
point.
Young the same as Steph Curry?
I think even though what I just said was that there aren't a lot of guards who can routinely humiliate, your center, at the same time, that's a reason why those kind of centers maybe aren't here. That's why Roy Hibbert was not able to stay in the league, because he would have gotten exploited on a nightly basis by any team except for the Philadelphia 76ers. Because you can't have him guarding Kemba Walker on any possession ever. You can't have him on Spencer Dinwiddie. You can't have him on Lowry. Every team except the Sixers has a guard who can just annihilate an immovable, plodding big on every possession, and they will just do it and do it and do it until you take the guy off the court. So Curry was the beginning of that happening, but every team then started doing that, really picking on big guys in a way that even like Kevin Love as a center gets picked on. And he's far more mobile and spent most of his playing days as a power forward against guards who are quick.
Yeah, and it's lateral movement and speed and seeing a play develop. Or players, I think, like Nerlens Noel will survive, and a player like Anthony Davis adapted, and he's just an otherworldly kind of guy. But
Right. I mean, that's the difference between a modern defensive player of the year candidate and the defensive player of the year candidates from 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Right, like Joakim Noah kind of lacks the attributes to kind of like grow into a different style of player. And let's not forget, I think Roy Hibbert was ushered out of the league a little bit because he was like a true knucklehead. Post-game interviews, not much nuance, just kind of a lovable moron. As long as
He's a Sixers assistant coach.
I know, which was
I think
amazing.
he's just country.
Maybe, but remember he had that Cameron moment where like, and I hate this, but like no homo was a thing in rap music, and he dropped that after a game during a playoff series, and everyone's like, what are you talking about? And he got kind of owned it. I'm like, he would always have these moments where I'm like, is that a reason why teams are like, he's useful still, but we'll let the next team
I don't
sign
know.
him.
I'm not sure. Jokic did the same thing though.
Yeah, but Jokic is too good to not right. This is the Peter Luger's argument that we always have. Like, if you're as good as Jokic, like, all right, we'll sit down and talk to this guy. If you're Hibbert, maybe not.
You could be right. I just don't know
True.
if that's the case with Hibbert. I mean, there were rumors about locker room problems here or there. I just don't know the truth to that, or if that is the reason that he was out of the league. Or people were like, we can't put you out there to guard guards. You're not a good rebounder for your size.
True.
And you're not a post scorer, and you can't really catch lobs, and you can't shoot. So you're kind of damaging at this point on both sides of the ball. But let's go back to that verticality era. Remember when every playoff game between the Heat, it was the Heat, right? It was the Heat.
I don't know. Wait, go.
I'm saying it was the Heat versus the Pacers, right? It
Oh,
was not Cavs, it was Heat. Correct?
correct.
And all we heard about was verticality. That, like, they had the LeBron stopper because LeBron scored more than anyone in the league at the rim, and he had to develop a little floater to get it over Roy Hibbert's head. It was like a thing,
Yeah,
like verticality.
yeah.
And they would explain it in every game by drawing
Hibbert was
straight
a
lines
problem.
up.
Yeah, yeah. It was Miami, right? Because Levitard would always talk up Hibbert, and now he kind of eats crow about it.
Has verticality just been absorbed into the way that big guys play defense and it's not interesting? Or has it stopped being a defensive strategy? Because I'm thinking about guys like Gobert and Embiid, who are the best rim protectors in the league, and they kind of do that. They jump up straight. They keep their arms up. If they get called for foul, you'll see them argue that they're keeping their arms up.
Yeah.
I think we just stopped being interested in it.
Well, it's tough, right? Because I'm fascinated and love Mitchell Robinson more than anything, and he's that type of player. Like, he's a traditional vertical guy, right? And there's a danger within the salary cap of having a Gobert or Hibbert, because eventually they get paid and then you can't use them in certain spots. But there is an evolution of every position on the floor, right? Like in the last maybe 3 years, we've seen 3-and-D kind of get aged out, and the demands of a 4 like Ben Simmons change, or the demands of a guard change. And I think it happens so fast because there are certain players that are introduced into the NBA that provide different issues for certain rosters, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of the advancements of the game are improperly registered by conventional wisdom. And this ties to, what we always talk about with like Ben Simmons, but also Mitchell Robinson believing that he needs to develop a jumper.
No.
And it's like, no, you guys are taking away the wrong elements of the modern game.
Yeah.
It's not that everyone needs to be able to shoot threes. That doesn't matter. There's no one on the planet who thinks that every single player on the court to run an effective offense needs to shoot threes. You don't. You don't need 5 guys to be able to shoot threes. You can. It's nice to have, but you don't need it. You need 4. Maybe you need 3, depending on how good your shooters were. When you look at that Golden State team, they had the best offense in history with Durant, Curry, Clay. They were playing Iguodala, non-shooter. They were playing Draymond,
Green, yeah.
non-shooter. They were playing starting Looney, non-shooter. They played Bogut, non-shooter. Like, they were running
Sean Livingston,
lineups, non-shooter.
Yeah.
They were running lineups with 3 non-shooters sometimes, but almost always 2.
Yep.
Or at least functional non-shooters, guys that would be abandoned every single time by the defense. So my point is, just forthright. But my point is, going back, is that the lessons we have to learn about the advancement of the game are not necessarily the ones that we talk about widely. And some of it is like, Gobert, can you get us to the playoffs? Can you beat every opponent until we get to that one guy that we have no solution with, and we'll just have to sort that out? Like Mitchell Robinson, you don't need to learn to shoot threes. You need to learn to stay on the court. Verticality. Stop fouling people. I don't know. I think the lessons of modern basketball are occasionally misconstrued. And like Mitchell Robinson, if he can become a good 3-point shooter, that would be great. But it's certainly not something he needs.
No, and I don't know why we want to check off all these attributes for every player like a video game. But even in a video game system, like, you can't be fast and strong. Like, you have to legislate a little bit. And you're right. Like, I think the issue of verticality from, let's say, the starting point of Hibbert till now is like in flux still, right? Because James Wiseman is going to come into the league next year and probably going to be a top 5 pick in this draft. And he reminds me a lot of Roy Hibbert a little bit. Maybe a better scorer, maybe a more offensively talented guy. But
Roy Hibbert kind of had trouble running.
That's
like
true.
Weissman is a good athlete, right?
He's smooth. Yeah. But he's not as dynamic as like Anthony Davis. He should be a top 5 pick. He's not a number 1, I don't think, but he still might go number 1. But he's not a consensus player like Anthony Davis was. I mean, Gobert kind of went later in the draft. These players aren't as valued as highly as they were back in, the aughts. And but it just takes one. It just takes one dominant player and the right combination of pieces around him to change this entire narrative. Maybe that's my point. If you put Mitchell Robinson on a team that could really use his skill set, then we're talking about the reintroduction of the verticality era, right?
Or it just never ended. True. And it's still been going on.
Yeah.
But we just have gotten rid of those players who were most emblematic of it. And just to backtrack on one point I said earlier, Roy Hibbert did not play 4 years at Georgetown.
Okay.
He played less than that. But to that point, Roy Hibbert may have introduced an idea, and We took that idea and it became a defensive principle that now we don't need to talk about because it's how every big man who protects the rim plays now. Clint Capella, verticality, that they all just do it. And the same way that three-point shooting, we don't really need to have this conversation between Chris Webber and someone else about like, three-pointers these days, man. This has been going on for a decade.
Yeah,
the fact that teams take a lot of threes is no longer a compelling story. And that, everyone's got to learn to shoot threes now. No, it's not. It's not interesting. Right. That's old news. Threes are like rebounding. Threes are like defensive players using verticality. Right. It's just part of the game. And now we need the next interesting thing that's going to help a team like the Pacers play above their talent level.
Mm-hmm. What do you think that thing will
what's
be?
next? I don't know. It could be what the Rockets are doing.
I love it. And I think, and I love the draft, but it will kind of be dictated by what kind of player comes out. Like Luka Doncic is going to change the complexion of the game a little bit in the style he plays. Or maybe it's an old school style. That's really tough, right? It's like we kind of evolve towards the past sometimes, depending on who is taking up the airspace.
For sure. Zion Williamson is an incredibly old school player. Mm-hmm. He is a 6'6" power forward who scores at the rim. That's a very, very old school style of player.
Never shoot, Zion. Stay gold, Zion.
Yeah. No, he's great.
Yeah, he's awesome.
But he's not futuristic.
No.
The league has become futuristic, which is enabling him to thrive in that role. Zion would have had trouble scoring in that role 8 years ago. Because he would have had a post-up center in the way. There would have been defenders in the lane. Yeah. He's able to attack the rim with very little resistance around him. Right. Because you can spread the floor.
Yeah. And it's reasonable to think he would have even been more dominant in that era than he is now. But, I mean...
See, I think it's the opposite because when those guys like Kobe, AI, Stackhouse, every time they attacked the basket, there was like 7 dudes there. Totally. And you see Zion... He's kind of going one-on-one every play. He just gets the ball, turns around, does his little like sweeping little hook layup and kind of floats in there. And there's like no one else there.
Yeah. To that point, though, I think in that era, there was so much isolation and so much heavy weighted usage on certain players that he would just have the ball in his hands constantly. Like he would just be like a usage gobbling truffle hog. And I think he would have succeeded in that era. I mean, he's a good player, man.
For sure. And you are right. Maybe he would have shot a ton more. I just think he might have been kind of like a Vin Baker in that way.
Shout out to Vin Baker. Knicks
legend.
Like
a good player.
Yeah. Team
power
USA.
Forward, scored at the basket, used a lot of post moves, kind of did like waded through traffic and shouldered people off and used his strength and long arms to just kind of finish above them. And was not a good passer. Was not a great defender.
Zion's ace card is his speed, right? Like a lot of guys are bigger and taller. A lot of guys are taller than him, but it's his.
No one's bigger than him.
No one's bigger than him, but it's his speed that is his unique attribute that makes him.
Well, it's his leaping ability too.
Yeah. But in order to get into a situation where the leaping ability helps him is like his quickness and. I don't know why I always say twitch muscles, but like he can get up and down for like a putback really fast and like.
For sure.
He's awesome.
His explosiveness, when you put him at the 5 and you try to have a center chase him in the open court, he's too fast. He elevates too quickly. Exactly what you pointed out. There's no one that I can recall, and I'm not even trying to come up with other examples, who's able to get up and down for a second jump as fast as him. It's just ridiculous. He misses a shot, he gets the rebound, he's up, and guys are still flat-footed. Yeah,
although he has like a really, it's like a video game. He has a really short endurance span, so it sucks that the season the world is awful, but it sucks that we didn't get to see more games because teams were starting to run him into the ground, and he was getting tired, and there was, right before the season was suspended, we got to see how teams were adjusting to him and kind of like wearing him down. And we'll just have to wait.
Yeah, I mean, whenever the season comes back in whatever capacity, we only got 19 games of Zion between his injury and then the league shutting down because Gobert decided to defend against everyone. We only got 19 games.
It's wild. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about how we just should erase 2020 from our memory and how was such a lost season. But it was so great. Like we got 19 games of Zion. We got to see LeBron and Anthony Davis dominate, and neither of them got hurt. Like, I would chalk up this season as a success. We got to see a ton of cool stuff.
A team like the Bucks has...
Yeah, man, the Bucks.
They've played 65 games. That's not that far off from 82.
Yeah.
Without revisiting our discussion about you wanting the Knicks to properly lose, 65-game season is not nothing.
Yeah, no, it's a huge sample size.
Yeah, so I understand the inclination for people to say, just scrap the whole season. I'm like, no, we did enough.
Yeah.
We can jump in with the playoffs. This idea that, like, we should just start next season and forget about the playoffs, like, you can't do that. You need a champion.
Yeah, I agree. I'm on the side of playing regular season games, but also just canceling them. I just don't care. Like, give us an asterisk season. It's fine. I am the one here who trusts the process of the lottery, and someone else does not. But I'm willing to give that up because these are unique times, man.
Yeah, I just think we need a champion.
That'll be fun.
When you go through the record books and you look at the year-by-year champions, you got to have one. You can't say, we played 65 games and then the season was over. Whenever we get back, you got to knock the playoffs out. And then you'll say, all right, that was last year's champion. Let's take a few months off, and then we'll get back and start this over again. You can't just have a season without a champion. And I'm not even some purist. I'm like, just wait until basketball comes back and give us a champion, and then we'll figure it out.
Tim Duncan and the Spurs, I believe at least one, maybe two of their championships were shortened seasons from lockouts. 99 was a shortened season, and I believe another one. But there's an asterisk there. The only person who cares about
but the only person who cares about that is like Lakers fans. Because Phil Jackson called it an asterisk. No one really cared otherwise.
I'm not. Yeah, I mean, we don't put an asterisk next to those Bulls teams that played with a shortened 3-point line.
I do.
The Phil Jackson stand has logged on. But yeah, I hope we get some games, man. Like, I don't know what your circle that isn't our overlapping circle is feeling, but like my friends really would like to see some hoops and are really worried about everything, and it's dark. We're just beginning this, but I hope we get hoops, man.
The 2011-2012 NBA season only had 66 games because of labor shit.
Yeah.
Like, we already have more than that.
Was that the Spurs season?
I think so. Was that the one? I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention. I was just looking at the games played.
I mean, don't you miss labor arguments? They seem so quaint now, don't they? Like, oh, you guys are arguing over not really important stuff, and you'll figure it out.
Shout out to Joel Embiid for stepping up and offering $500,000 to Sixers employees who the organization had requested take a pay cut of 20% over the rest of the year.
Do you have a take?
Cool.
Do you have a take on this? They got roasted on the internet for this and then doubled down on it.
You know, if your investment in the team has gone from buying it for $500 million to it being valuated at probably $2.5 to $3 billion, pay your employees. Just pay them. You have made so much money by the time you sell this team. Just pay them. You have billions of dollars. Pay your guys. Like, don't be greedy.
Yeah, I don't know what anyone's wealth looks like and what anyone's liquid wealth looks like versus what they're worth, but it seems like Josh Harris didn't read the room. We're helping people now. Pay everybody. That's what we're doing.
I'm just not here for any sob stories from any billionaires ever.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can't pay the guys? Sell the team.
Right.
Use some of that money to pay them off, and then someone else will do it.
Yeah. It's so funny. I'm here for all sob stories because I think this is such a crazy time. And rich people aren't like aliens. They're not green, but like, yeah, just pay your staff. Like, just do it. And I thought it was a really tone deaf thing.
My thing is, I would not be outraged if someone put in a policy that if you can track down and capture a billionaire, you get 5% of his money, and then the rest gets donated to a public pool that will help people. I'd be like, let the games begin.
This
Like,
is
find their bunkers, and you will get 5% of their earnings.
you
I would not
doing-
be like, don't do that. That's crazy. Come on, be fair to the billionaires. I'm like, wow. Desperate times call for desperate measures.
Have we turned into a young adult fiction pod? Is this the Hunger Games?
Is that what it was about? I didn't see it. Were there billionaires on the run?
You didn't watch any of the Hunger Games,
I haven't seen any of the Hunger Games.
but you don't like movies, right? So okay, is it okay to say that you don't like movies?
I like movies.
Certain movies.
I don't like movies for children.
I like movies for children.
That's fine.
Yeah. But Hunger Games was like a worldwide cultural phenomenon. You didn't like by accident watch. the
No,
first
I haven't
one?
seen Avatar. I don't watch movies for infants.
You don't like science fiction.
No, I don't like monster movies.
What movies do you like?
Super intellectual ones,
Like,
like Trading Places.
it's a good one.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I like movies like that.
You're a boomer. Wait, can you name one like that we can watch tomorrow? Can you give us a recommendation?
Can I give you a recommendation?
What should I watch tonight, man?
Do you want like a kind of horny movie, but that's good?
I can watch YouTubes of Keith Van Horn dominating the MSG. So no, I have that covered. Nick's Legend.
The Handmaiden is a good movie if you haven't seen that. Korean film. A little titillating. But very good. Good twists, good sort of a psychological thriller
I like thrillers.
about a young poor woman who is taken from her village and brought on to be the handmaiden for a wealthy woman, and is given the task of seducing her so that they can steal her money.
Man, a lot of Korean movies are about class, right? It's sort of like British in that way. It's always upstairs, downstairs. U.S. is invasion all the way. But
Yep. It's very. I mean, I saw it maybe 2 years ago, and then remembered it because of everyone talking about Parasite and exactly that dynamic that you're describing.
yeah, I love the British movies with that story. I can watch it all nonstop.
Anyway, that's my recommendation.
I'm going to check it out. I don't really watch that many subtitled things these days because I'm
It's
too
very
busy.
close to reading.
It's too close to reading. We're getting dangerously close to books, Ben.
You know, just one last thing about basketball before we denigrate the craft of
The written
books.
word. Yeah.
when we're talking about guys like Roy Hibbert and their effectiveness, part of it is that they are unattractive. The verticality center is not a beneficiary of the kind of biases that make us appreciate, say, a Klay Thompson. Shooting.
Dribbling, being awesome, being really good.
I'm sorry,
Go on, you
dribbling.
got me.
All right, let's go back to Kyrie, someone who can dribble. Kyrie.
Kyrie's amazing.
So those guys don't have that skill set. And even Gobert he's a boring, plodding player, but he's also underrated because he's a boring, plodding player who sticks his arms up. And we're like, cool, thanks for doing that, man. Like that was really fun.
All right.
Does this extend to guys who are not centers? Are there players who are ugly players, but are still good, who play non-big positions?
One of my favorite videos of this week is the Paul Pierce McDonald's dunk contest. So awesome. If you haven't seen it, it's excellent. Future Hall of Famer. If he's not currently a Hall of Famer, I forget. Paul Pierce putting on a show, but maybe missing these very kind of pedestrian dunk attempts. And we're just like, we know what to do. We'll like get into the stance where it blows our minds. Here he goes, and he like back rims just like a pump fit, or like a pump, and we're just like, oh, maybe the next one. And it's just hilarity the whole way
I believe
through.
he misses 4 dunks in that clip.
So
2 of
cool.
them are kind of errant passes that he is unable to snare midair, and then the other ones are him just like really short rimming it.
Flying through the air is not Paul Pierce's skill, and that's not how I'm going to remember him. But he reminds me of, and this is like a not great thing to think about, but how we talk about celebrities, like ugly hot celebrities, like actors who we find very charming and can hold a movie and are attractive, but not traditionally handsome, like Philip Seymour Hoffman, maybe. He's like awesome. He's like ugly hot, right? Like
I don't know that I've ever seen people describe him as ugly hot. They could. I'm sure they have. Adam Driver is a good example.
That's a better example.
Where women are like, is he hot? And men. But generally the perception is like, I don't know. Is he good looking? Are we aroused by him? Or do we just like him as an actor and think he looks cool? What's this confusion about him versus like a Brad Pitt?
Right. Yes, exactly. He's not like Harrison Ford or Brad Pitt, where it's just like, right, you are a movie star. He's more like Adam Driver, I think, is a great example of like the most recent example. But I think of like someone like Daniel Craig, or he's not quite Pierce Brosnan, but he's 007, and he can carry it. And we're actually more interested in Daniel Craig as 007 over Pierce Brosnan, because he's not like just traditional kind of like out of the package handsome, right? And there's basketball players like that.
And another part of it is like, if we're talking about women as an actress, a woman who just looks like a woman who looks like a supermodel is not necessarily compelling as a character, because you look at them and you say, she looks like a supermodel.
Right.
She's unbelievably hot, and she's here in a role, and there's this incredibly hot person playing this role.
Yeah. It's
And
sort
it kind
of like,
of almost distracts from the role itself.
it's like The Voice. All these people who compete on this show can sing. 90% of them can sing so well, even better than the celebrity singer judges. But the thing that makes these judges interesting is their little intricacies and their flaws, and maybe they're not the best classical singer and they don't hit all their notes, but it's the personality that comes through. So when you see like someone out of the package playing in a game or in a movie, you're just like, I understand this a little too well. You need to give me a little bit of a wrinkle. And that would be like, I always wanted the next James Bond to be Ronda Rousey or something. Like I think that would be interesting. Some sort of texture. And Daniel, I don't know why I'm fixated on 007, because he's such a projection of this thing in movies. But people were saying, why can't Idris Elba be 007? And they're like, well, 007's white. And I'm like, fair. But does he have to be moving forward, And Daniel Craig is like more of like a tough guy, as opposed to like this kind of Cold War spy that seduces men and women around him to get to the villain, is kind of old-fashioned now.
I don't really get those arguments to be like, well, he was white. Like who cares? You know what I mean? Like that's like a totally irrelevant one. He's a fucking cop. There's nothing about his race that matters whatsoever. And you would see sort of the pushback on that. Be like, yeah, well, you don't want Black Panther to be a white guy. It's like, that's a different thing.
Yeah. And maybe I just like the Idris Elba thing because I like Idris Elba.
I think he would be great as a James Bond character.
He's
James
just
Bond.
Perfect, yeah. But
And
we don't
also,
have to signal anything. I just think he would be
there's also no specific difference between like him and Sean Connery, who's Scottish, and the other guys, other than being like they are of a different Dalton. Race. Yeah. I just mean, you let a Scottish guy be it.
Yeah,
like
I know.
Like, and he's one of the most cherished characters or actors who've played that role. I don't know. I don't even feel like getting into that whole thing. It's
We're in
always,
nebulous territory, and like back to Paul Pierce. Can we think
no,
of
to me that whole thing of like the sanctity of source material is just absolute madness. But anyhow,
But like,
yes.
but direct creators are allowed to go through with their vision. You know, like I think HBO Girls was hammered for not having more people of color or diversity on it, but it's Lena Dunham's story, and like we can like it or not.
You're
like
also
it.
allowed to, yeah, but that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're not liking it.
Yeah, exactly. And people at the end didn't like that show. I liked it quite a bit, but like, I don't think any creator. I mean, we should take all these things into consideration. But if you decide to produce like a story with your vision, like that's cool with me.
I don't think anyone disputes what you just said. Like, if you create a story with your vision, you are opening yourself up to those criticisms if your vision is myopic, if your vision is not diverse, if your vision is super old-fashioned. Yeah, you are allowed to do your vision. It's not against the law.
Yeah,
But you are also subjected to people saying, like, why the fuck is this your vision?
Yeah, exactly, and that's a discussion. I always think about people wanting James Dolan to sell the team, and I'm like, just because we don't like the product or the vision, because he's, as we know, very profitable, why would he ever give that up just because you don't like the product?
Yeah, and also, even in the case of something like Girls, if she had been like, okay, one of them is black, one of them is Latina, and one of them is Asian, and then
But
it's
hammered
me,
her. Yeah.
it would have been like, oh, what is this paint by numbers Benetton ad? And are you writing these characters authentically? Can you write them authentically? Right. Okay, now your writer's room is going to be reflective of those. And then we're talking about a different show.
Exactly.
So I think you are 100% able to criticize her, but I don't know what the alternative necessarily would have been that would have been satisfactory.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're satisfying one opinion at the expense of another. Making things is really hard. And
But I also do think there is a benefit to having like a diverse writer's room and diverse ideas, and then maybe you don't go down some of the awkward channels that she did.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I don't really hang out with many people who share my opinions because how boring would that be? Present company excluded.
And because they're so bad.
Listen, my opinions are my opinions, and if you want to call them bad, so be it.
I'm entitled to that. That's the Cookies Creed.
Klay Thompson is kind of good.
So for your ugly players, your ugly hot pet players, the ugly babies
Ugly
of the
babies.
NBA.
Right. All babies are wonderful gifts to our society, but some of them are not your archetypical beauties. Still adorable. All adorable. I'm talking about Tim Duncan.
Tim Duncan's an ugly baby.
Yeah. His game was, we always called those dominant Spurs teams like so hard to watch. And I'm like, actually, like Manu Ginobili's an awesome Euro left-hander. Tony Parker is kind of an exciting slashing guard. Tim Duncan is very upright and very kind of like not angular and doesn't really show emotion. So he was kind of like an ugly hot player. He was so good, but so boring. He hit all of his free throws.
I mean, even people talking about his big fundamentals, which was the nickname Shaq bestowed him with.
Yeah.
It was about making bank shots from like 12 feet away.
I know. And like, it just he had no weaknesses. If he was a really poor free throw shooter like DeAndre Jordan or Shaq,
He was pretty bad for a we but then he just
got good.
He got fine.
And he was more interesting as a bad free throw shooter, right? Like,
Yeah, I agree.
we wouldn't call him boring if he had a weakness like that. But since there was like kind of no way to guard him or punish the Spurs for putting him on the floor, it made it seem like he was ugly. And that's who I think of.
It is easier, though, to target big guys for this because they generally aren't great shooters. They generally aren't great dribblers.
They're not that fast.
They aren't fast. Most aren't good passers. Some are, but that's not a quality one associates with like a defensive-oriented big man. I liked Paul Pierce as an example. What about Lowry? Is Lowry an ugly baby?
He's got that wagon. I think he's beautiful, Ben.
I mean, he's thick.
Yes.
That's true. I'm not here to judge standards of beauty.
Yeah, we're talking about game only. But I think I have a trouble with Lowry because I think his game is actually really interesting too. So, why is he an ugly baby to you?
Well, I think taking charges is a gross habit that I can't really respect. But he's good at it, and it's effective. But I don't like it. I don't like the way
Taking charges in the All-Star game.
Yeah, I mean, that's some ugly baby-ass behavior.
Yeah.
You know, when he drives baseline, he always tries to throw himself into the help defender and then bounce himself out of bounds. Like, he just tries to draw a foul on that play every single time by plowing into the defender and flopping. Like, that's not pretty. That's ugly baby shit. But he is really good.
It's really good. Would the apex version of your Lowry take be James Harden? Doesn't he do all those things as well? And like half of us hate him, I think, just because of optically the game, the way he looks when he plays, right?
I know. I don't find his game ugly, though. And
It's beautiful, yeah.
It's a real fine line, right? Because you could say, well, how was Lowry's game ugly? But Harden's a genius.
Harden is fun to watch.
Maybe Lowry is too. Lowry is a basketball genius.
I like Lowry.
Borderline at least.
Yeah.
But there is something different about Harden's ability to just like cook people and like, you know, drop them on the floor in front of him off his handle and like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Harden's game to me is really beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know why Austin Rivers came to mind, but every time he steps on the court, I'm like, yeah, you're okay. But he's not even like good enough to be a baby. But like, he's an ugly player who I don't enjoy watching. But he is skinny and a guard and has a bit of a handle. He's kind
of a slob though.
Yeah, he might not be good enough to be in this conversation.
If we're talking about guys who are good, and we've already accepted that drawing fouls could be a component of ugly babyhood, I would say Lou Williams is a possible candidate because his game is mostly driving left and like doing herky-jerky moves until he gets contact and then throwing the ball up at the rim. Like, he's skilled, he can dribble, he's cool looking.
Those circus shots are appealing, man.
But he does some ugly baby shit. Sam Cassell is an ugly baby. But now I feel like I'm judging it off of him being kind of funny looking. So now I feel guilty about
it. Right. But I know where you're going with this. Can I throw Ray Allen into the ugly baby mix? Because I found his game to be pretty boring.
No, because he benefits from the biases that we've talked about. Shooting bias, beautiful release bias. He's got some rings. He's a prom king.
No, he's not. He's not a prom king. He was a triple-double guy. He was a passer, right? On the Bucks, he was a triple-double machine. I could be mistaken.
You might be mistaken, but he did do more on the Bucks and the Sonics when he was like the marquee guy than becoming like a specialist on Boston and Miami. That's true. I mean, he was a legitimate superstar when he was, or borderline superstar when he was young.
We have months to workshop this ugly baby thing, and this will be a reoccurring theme. And I'm gonna go back and scour Basketball Reference and try to find the ugliest babies on the internet.
Let's do it. That's our next episode.
Ugly baby.
This next. One's ugly baby. Anyway, cookies.